Nomad Podcast.
So hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Nomad Podcast. And today I have the wonderful Rob Wallace, which is the co-founder of the Bitcoin News, joining me. And he will briefly share his rabbit hole story and also how the Bitcoin News came into place. And next to that, we will also discuss recent related topics and how that all unfolds. So if you don't want to get spoiled too much by myself, let's get right to the episode. So, hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Nomad Podcast. And today I have the wonderful Rob Wallace joining me. And Rob, I normally, by the way, is that okay with you calling you Rob by my? So, is that okay? Okay, cool. I normally start the episode, Rob, with people sharing their rabbit hole story. So, would you like to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on. Appreciate the invite. So, my story with Bitcoin, I think you can trace it back to sort of the birth of Bitcoin, when Bitcoin was born, the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, right? I was a sophomore in college at Tufts studying international relations, and I thought I wanted to work for the government, be a diplomat, something like that, studying Chinese, thought it would have something to do with that. So, was on a pretty straight and narrow path in that regard. But as soon as they started coming on TV and saying that we needed to give the banksters close to $1 trillion, or else they would put tanks on the streets. Literally, Hank Paulson, the Secretary of Treasury at the time, came out and said, if we don't give these guys all this money, then we are going to have martial law. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, something's wrong here, right? He's a bankster himself. He's from Goldman Sachs. He's telling us that he's holding Congress hostage. And at first, Congress was actually pretty reticent. They didn't want to give this money to the banks for messing up, but it was the markets were crashing. The pressure was building up, and it just took a couple of weeks of the markets turning down for the government to fold and hand over all this taxpayer money. And so I realized at that point it was time to figure out what was really going on here. Went down the rabbit hole. That was back in 2008, 2009. YouTube was just wide open, right? I mean, any conspiracy theory you wanted to look into, any rabbit hole you want to go down, it was open and very easy to find. And so I found out everything from, of course, Afghanistan and Iraq wars, going down the 9/11 hole, and just realized, wow, I've been lied to. And the story that I've been told my whole entire life, that America is this shining beacon on a hill. We are the good guys. We've always done what's right. And history has shined brightly upon us. That was sort of a false narrative, right? And so that entails a lot of cognitive dissonance. You, of course, it sort of hurts to have this narrative that you've been brought up with in your head to be stripped down and had to rebuild it back up. And so that got me into Ron Paul, Austrian economics, hard money, and realizing that, wow, this whole entire international relations diplomat route was not the path I wanted to go down. But yeah, so I was studying Chinese at the time, and that brought me to China. And I spent the next 4 years in Shanghai, where I worked on video production, worked for a magazine, putting on events, and just genuinely having the time of my life up until that point. This was before Xi Jinping. And so China had just had the Olympics in 2008. They had the World Expo in 2010. They were very open to foreigners coming over there. It was just cranes upon cranes. The country was booming economically, and it was just a lot of fun to be a guy in his early 20s, going out, doing what I love to do, media production, and just having a lot of fun. Started a YouTube channel and got into my media career there. About 4 years later, Xi Jinping took over. The vibe was shifting. I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in China, so I came back to America, worked in media agencies, advertising, marketing in New York City, but still always had the intellectual passion of what is really going on with the money. Something's broken here. But again, my thesis from back in 2008, 2009 of we're going to have hyperinflation soon, that didn't really play out, right? Markets were just pretty much a straight line up throughout the 2010s. Tech stocks did really, really well. And so the doomers from that era were proved wrong, because even the price of gold and silver didn't perform, right? And so in every way, you were sort of made to look like an idiot for thinking that something was seriously wrong with the money throughout the 2010s. But still, I was investigating, and in 2016 is when I bought my first Bitcoin. I went to a Bitcoin ATM in Manhattan. I put in, I was like, I'm just gonna put in some money and see what happens with it, right? So I put in $1,000 and I got 2.2 Bitcoin, which is pretty cool. Yeah, it was $420 a Bitcoin back in 2016. But I had no idea what I was doing, right? I had a QR code with a printout that had my private keys on it, and that was my Bitcoin. I had no idea about cold storage or hardware wallets or anything like that. So then I was traveling. I had my QR code with my Bitcoin in my backpack. I was in the airport in Las Vegas. I put my backpack down on the ground as I'm about to leave to put in $5 into a slot machine. To bide my time waiting for my flight, I pulled the lever. I lose my $5, of course, but I look down and I lose my backpack as well. It was stolen. It was just right there. And so
Oh
that was
no.
my hard lesson of learning you better store your Bitcoin properly. And that was right before Bitcoin just took off, right? When it went from $1,000 up to
Yeah.
19,000, 20,000 in 2017. So that got me a little sour on Bitcoin. I didn't really put too much time or attention into it after that. But then 2020 came and they started printing money again. And I got that same sinking feeling in my stomach that I need to do something. And I knew that the gold and silver route of the past decade didn't really work out for me. So I looked into other things and Bitcoin was it, right? And so went deep down the rabbit hole in 2020 and kept getting deeper and deeper. And that led me to joining on Bitcoin News in 2022, 2023.
Cool. So I guess during during the start of the pandemic, then like most of the people got really interested into, at least friends I know, really into Bitcoin, and really got into the rabbit hole story. And generally, 2020 was also when I really hardcore got into Bitcoin. And back then, we as a family, we just had time. So I read like all the books, the Bitcoin standards. What was that? What back then was also like, I don't know, like tons of books about Bitcoin and like how the money system works. And in a sense, I always say the pandemic was kind of a blessing, so blessing in a weird way, but that's really cool. Like story wise, how you got from the politician in a sense to like the hardcore Bitcoiner, just for saying as it is. So yeah, but then how did that with the Bitcoin News come into place? Do you know the story how that was created? And I mean, you're the co-founder of the Bitcoin News, so how did that all
Yeah.
happen?
So it's between 2021 to 2023. I was working as a producer for a travel show for Barstool Sports called Rediscovering America, where we travel around the country and make
Mhm.
hilarious travel videos, right? Interviewing some of the weirdest people in America that you could find and highlighting their stories and whatnot. And so I had a lot of fun doing that. But I was also just voraciously consuming Bitcoin content. And I knew deep down that that path, I mean, it was fun. I love being able to deliver laughs to people via video. That's one of my favorite things. But all that stuff was sponsored by alcohol brands, by gambling, by sports betting, right? And so I realized that I really want to take my talents in this media sphere and translate them over to Bitcoin, which is my intellectual passion, but also something I think is ethical and moral and a good way to spend one's time. So I was looking for positions after the second season wrapped of the travel show, and I saw that Bitcoin News was looking for a video editor and somebody to take charge of that. So I got in contact with them. There was this German guy, Lee, who was running it at the time, and he had purchased the domain in, I think, 2020, 2021. And it was a small site. They had some editorial going on, but I mean, everything was very much in its new position, right? So when I joined on, I mean, the funny thing about bitcoinnews.com, the URL, the website that we have, it was actually founded back in 2015, 16, I believe. But it was like a altcoin content mill, right? They were just pumping out all the stuff about ICOs and just not Bitcoin
Yep.
focused like we are today. So Lee took over the domain from them. I joined on with Lee. And then by September of 23, me and another co-founder, Matt, we we took over bitcoinnews.com. So we've been running it for about a little over a year and a half now. The two of us, we've got a team of about 9, 10 people around the world. Whether it's our editor in Iran, designer in Thailand, we've got plenty of Twitter contributors and whatnot in Latin America, another one in Italy. So it's a very global team of Bitcoiners, and we've built it out over the last 2+ years now, and it's my dream job. It's a lot of fun. Every single day I get to wake up and talk to the world about Bitcoin and that which I find interesting. And it's literally taking what I got into back in 2008, 2009, and just using the power of the internet and social media to broadcast it, right? I mean, that's the amazing time that we live in. I think of course, the mainstream media has taken its blows, especially since COVID, and people like authentic, real voices of people that have put in the work and they've grown to trust over time. And I hope that's what we've done at Bitcoin News over the last 2 years, that we can be a trusted source of information. And while we might be Bitcoin propagandists, we do think that we are truthful and are exposing the world to information that they might not get otherwise.
Yeah. And especially, the internet. I mean, back then they also said the internet will never be a thing. It will always have like a few thousand users, and now it's like a worldwide thing. And now when I compare this to Bitcoin, Bitcoin will never reach like 1 million or it will. I mean, we have people say that it will never reach like 100K, and look where we are now. We reached like 100K like a few weeks ago. So
Mm-hmm.
so just the fact that it went from it's gonna be like a BS thing to now, oh no, it's the next gold, it's the next best thing, better than gold. It's a digital gold, it's a digital version of money, which is better than any money there is in the world, right? So but yeah, so the Bitcoin News channel basically, it's similar to the Bitcoin magazine then, or is it not that similar? Or in a sense, what would you say? Is it then similar to Bitcoin magazine? Also, the work that they do with events, and conferences like the one in Las Vegas, which is like an upcoming one. Are you guys also there? And do you also sponsor conferences or events, or what do you kind of then do at conferences and events in a sense and generally? So
Yeah. So, great question about the difference between Bitcoin News and Bitcoin Magazine. Sometimes people get those two confused, of course. I think that's pretty easy too. But yeah, Bitcoin Magazine has been in the game for a long time, for over a decade now. Vitalik Buterin was one of the founding members over there, right? And it's crazy how yeah, he was. And now he's
okay,
leading Ethereum, right? So, yeah,
yeah.
things change very greatly. But David Bailey took it over in the late 2010s, and they threw their first Bitcoin conference in 2019. They got, of course, COVIDed out in 2020, but then sort of helped reopen America in some regards by throwing the big conference in 2021 down in Miami, when very few things like that were happening anywhere in the world. So I have a lot of respect for Bitcoin Magazine in terms of what they've been able to do, especially with the event itself. They're spreading around the world. They've got one in Asia, one in Abu Dhabi they just did, and lots of respect for that. The difference between us, I would say, is that we are pretty grassroots in the things that we support and the initiatives that we drive forward. Whether it's I mean, like just today, we have a partnership with Geyser Fund, which is a
Mm.
crowdsourcing website where you can raise money for your project in Bitcoin. Of course, frequented by a lot of Bitcoiners from around the world, whether it's circular economies or Bitcoin tarot cards, or Bitcoin street art, or whatever your idea is, and you want to make it come to life. You can set up a project over on Geyser and get funded over there, and we help them highlight a project once a week on Bitcoin News, where we help spread the word about grassroots Bitcoin adoption. So we love to show videos and write articles about Bitcoin adoption in Africa, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you can use this app called Tondo in Kenya and buy almost anything with Bitcoin in a grassroots way. So we like to focus on the circular economies, the grassroots efforts, the art projects from around the world based in Bitcoin. And I think that gives us a a community-driven feel, which we are. We want to help Bitcoiners where they are. Bitcoin is, despite the fact that there are institutions like BlackRock and the America established a strategic Bitcoin reserve, Bitcoin is a grassroots revolution, right? And unless there are
True.
people around the world using it on a daily basis, learning about it, spreading education, it's not going to grow or reach its full potential. So we like to focus on those aspects of Bitcoin. And I think that we've done a good job of that over the last 2 years.
So would you then agree that it's a peaceful revolution in a sense? So
Yeah,
because all the
it's
revolutions I know, they have been bloody in a sense. So
Yeah, that's the amazing thing about Bitcoin is that it is absolutely a revolution. I think that a lot of people, especially today, as we get closer in bed with governments and institutions, and I mean, just look at Michael Saylor, right? He has to be very careful in what he
yeah,
says and make sure that he doesn't step on toes and says that the dollar and Bitcoin will coexist. And they very well might. I mean, of course, on the base layer on chain, there's no way that Bitcoin could accommodate all the transactions around the world for everybody, of course. Um, but at the end of the day, Bitcoin is really is a disruptor, right? And it's going to eat the dollar's lunch because the dollar is the dollar's own worst enemy, and that it is designed to
yeah.
inflate and debase over time. And Bitcoin is anti-fragile. It's made to strengthen, get harder, and get more valuable over time. So, yeah, I think Bitcoin is it is a peaceful revolution, right? Because despite the fact that it is disrupting the oldest, strongest institutions, systems in the world, it's these institutions are also realizing that they need to adopt it themselves or else they will get left behind. So
Mhm.
it's a matter of it's persuasion through just being the best, like there is nothing else that can really touch it. And because of that, everybody else is going to sort of have to bend the knee to Bitcoin. And that's why Bitcoin doesn't need to go and chop anybody's head off.
That's a good point. I'm currently I'm not sure if you saw the news about the EZB and Lockhart and all that story about CBDCs. I mean, but why are they implementing CBDCs now? Because Europe is so far behind when it comes to technology aspects. And I have a lot of friends which are Bitcoiners, and they're always like, "Oh yeah, CBDCs they will come." I'm like, "Yeah, they will come, but what happens after that if they are here someday, or this year or whenever it's gonna happen, Because in my opinion, if they already have it and if it's already so advanced, why didn't they just implement it like 10 years ago, Like
Mm.
that's the biggest for me mind fuck. And I have to say it like that, it's a mind fuck. And also in a sense, fear that you spread by using the media, and especially the mainstream media in Europe is like horrible. I mean, they said that Kamala would win the election by 90%, and then look what happened. Trump won it like with 312 electoral votes or whatever you call those in the US there. But you know, that's kind of the shit we have to deal with Europe, or generally as a European who has roots from Austria and Switzerland. That's kind of the shit feeling that you have to go through every day by hearing bullshit literally on the TV. So, which brings me to my next question in a sense. How do you deal with education in a sense? What do you do to educate people about Bitcoin? Is it just by writing articles, or is there like also a time or an event which you are on stage telling people to buy Bitcoin or show them how to buy Bitcoin, or generally do you do that with educating people about Bitcoin?
Yeah, so we've got multiple platforms, right? We've got the Twitter, which I run and have been on pretty much 24/7 for the last 2 years, and have grown it a lot because of that, because of the constant attention that I've been able to give it. But it takes a lot of time and effort to do so. So we've got the Twitter, we've got daily editorial at bitcoinnews.com with new articles coming out every single day. We've got our YouTube, where we put out weekly live streams and interviews, as well as newsletters, right? And so we've got two different newsletters, one that's a news digest, one that is more charts and data based. And when it comes down to education, I think it's really about meeting people where they are. I think I mean, there's plenty of brilliant analysts and economists and people who have the credentials behind their names to give the economic standpoint of Bitcoin and why it is the most important. And I mean, of course, I'm fascinated by economics, but that is definitely not what I have a degree in or anything like that. So, what do I like to do? I like humor. I like video. I mean, I've been an editor since I was a kid, and chopping things up and making people laugh or keeping them entertained through videos. So I think, of course, it's the most powerful medium right now that we have. Of course, with the internet, everybody's got a TV screen in their pocket, so you can really reach a lot of people. And if you present it in the right way, you can inform people about things they would never have heard of otherwise. So over the last year, I've gotten into short form content. I can't believe this, but I'm a man in my 30s making TikTok videos, right? But it needs to be done, right? This information needs
Yeah.
to get out, and you need to reach people where they are. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's not like I'm out there dancing on TikTok. I'm making informational videos about Bitcoin, about news, economics, what's going on in the world, and some of them have popped, right? I mean, I just made a video on TikTok, but then shared it over on Instagram, on our Bitcoin News Instagram, about private equity in America. Private equity bought up a bunch of companies, especially during COVID, and then got them to take on a lot of adjustable rate debt. And so back in 2020, they could take on that debt, and it was very cheap for them to do so. But interest rates have shot up, of course, over the last 5 years. And now these companies that are completely profitable are nowhere near a problem area, are forced to go out of business. Joann's, a fabric store, Hooters, the restaurant, Party City, especially Hooters and Party City. I mean, these are companies that have been around my whole entire life and are pretty well known, I'd say, around the world, but they're forced into bankruptcy right now. Why? Because private equity
Mm.
came in, loaded them up with a bunch of debt, stripped businesses, essentially, is what private equity does. And now these household names are forced to go out of business. So I made a video about that, and that got close to 700,000 views on Instagram, right? So I mean, like, I think that's touching a lot of eyeballs, and hopefully that information will get into just 1% of people's minds, and they'll start looking at the world differently and start investigating things, because that's what it takes, right? I mean, the average person needs to be touched multiple times with an alternative
Yeah.
viewpoint before they can break through the mainstream media bias. They do such a good job of weaving this narrative that becomes all consuming and is very easy just to go along with in this lane. And it's, you either have to be extremely curious, or there needs to be more people like us creating alternative media that will break through that echo chamber, that narrative echo chamber. And I think more and more people today are open to it than ever before, but still there needs to be new content coming out on a daily basis in order to keep people informed and to shatter the echo chamber narrative that they've constructed so well for the vast majority of people.
In a sense, they need to be slapped like multiple times to wake up. In our family, we always discuss that maybe people nowadays, although the world is bad and although the world has some issues, people still have, they still have it too good, maybe in a sense, because when you look at like living standards, yes, of course, there are poor, there are rich, right? But people still have this feeling of, we're safe, trust the government, right? Maybe you have to really slap that out of them, slap them in the face and show them, no, that's not true. Look at how money has lost its value. I mean, $1 is not equal to $1 anymore. Just like £1 is not equal to £1 anymore. It's like when you look at the facts since 1971, where Reagan abolished the gold standard, how money just lost its value. I mean, maybe people, in a sense, need to wake up. And if that's through wars, through pandemics, through realizing that maybe certain things that happens on the planet, like in the UK with people being jailed for what they say on social media, right? So maybe people need to get slapped in the face and realize how the world truly functions. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're completely right. And Bitcoin is hard to understand if you don't think you have a real need for it, right? It takes a while to understand why a censorship-resistant, decentralized, peer-to-peer electronic cash would be valuable to you if you have a working bank account and Venmo and Zelle and other ways to send money on the internet, right? But for those in Latin America who don't have a bank account, right? For
Yeah,
small communities in Africa where I mean, it's impossible to get to a bank, right? But you do have a cell phone, and that means that your bank can be in your pocket with a Bitcoin wallet. And so I think for those people, it makes a lot of sense to adopt Bitcoin, especially as a medium of exchange, to create communities around Bitcoin. But for people in the West, people in Europe and America, it can be harder. I do think that the inflation of the last 5 years did sort of
yeah,
wake people up as to, wow, my money is getting increasingly worthless. I need to figure out an alternative. Many people turned, of course, to stocks and the whole Wall Street bets phenomena to try to beat inflation. But if you look at Bitcoin, it's the best performing asset of the last decade, of the last 15 years, and you can't beat that performance. So over time, yes, I do think that people will eventually turn to Bitcoin because, yeah, the fiat currency is only going to get weaker and weaker. People are going to realize that their standard of living is eroding from beneath them, and they need to make a move. And Bitcoin is that move. It's simple, it's easy, and it's a very vast, deep rabbit hole to go down in many different ways, whether it's philosophy or economics or even world history, my history of money. But it will eventually, everybody will wake up to the fact that they need some Bitcoin. But
and
one thing I'd like to talk to you about is just that
yeah.
difference between sort of America and Europe right now, and the general viewpoint on Bitcoin and where things are headed. Um, I think American Bitcoiners got very enthusiastic about the election of Trump, and there have been some good things. I mean, he did come through with this promise, free Ross. It wasn't exactly day one, but within the first month of his presidency, Ross Ulbricht was freed from jail, and completely his charges were completely erased. We've also had the end of, say, Operation Choke Point 2.0. The banking crackdown on Bitcoin and all that stuff has eased, and he established a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now, are there other things in which I'm questionable about Trump? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he's gotten very. It seems as if they use the populist illusion, of course, to ride a big wave into office, but now it seems very sort of oligarchic, right? I mean, we've got Elon in there. We've got Sam Altman with Chat GPT and OpenAI in the White House. We got Mark Zuckerberg at the inauguration. So was that's a question like Trump has said no CBDCs, right? And Jerome Powell has come out and
Yeah.
said no CBDCs in America. But do you need a CBDC if private stable coins are out there and the government can still just go to the private company and say, shut it off, right? So it seems to be no matter whether you're in Europe or America, we are seem to be converging on this sort of I don't want to say dystopian, but dystopian technocratic future where they watch everything and they have control over money except for Bitcoin, right? So even if you're a Bitcoiner who's super Trump rah rah go go, I think you have to realize that you always need to sort of you can only trust a politician as far as you can throw them. That's my take. And so
Yeah, or you can trust everyone, but not the devil that's inside of everyone, in a sense,
mm,
So
yeah. And so, I mean, just from you're talking about your friends in Europe and whatnot, like, what do you see there? What is the general zeitgeist, and what do they think about the future and where things are headed?
they think that we need to start World War III to defeat Putin. They think that the nuclear war is not bad, but at the same time, they also say we need to save the planet and fight for climate change. So that's my family and friend circle in a sense. But yeah, they do care, but they also don't care. And I don't know how I should explain this to you or generally to my viewers, but they're so far, they're going so far backwards that I can't even talk to them with about the simple stuff in life. If I talk to them about, hey, you want to grab some dinner? I know this is nice uh, Italian place where they have like nice steaks and pasta and everything. They're like, oh, how dare you? I'm a vegan. That's how far back humans, especially my friends, have gone. So whenever I talk to them about Bitcoin, they're still like, oh no, it's a scam. And even if I show them like, no, it's not the case, they still don't care. It's like between they don't care and they just want to keep on going on with their regular lives. So what can I tell you, man? It's
Yeah.
it's Europe. It's
Yeah.
fucked up. It's a sinking ship. That's my. If you want to leave Europe, do it now. But I think even now it's too late. So yeah, that's my word. Fucked up, or 2 words. So
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how Europe is supposed to be future looking and all about the environment, yet you have these
yeah,
politicians that are so war bent, right? Like they think that Putin is Hitler and that we need to risk World War III in order to stop him from taking portions of Ukraine, which is not a member of the EU or NATO, right? So
yeah, and even saying like we're for climate change, but at the same time they want to bomb like the crap out of Russia, with nuclear weapons. Like, have you seen how much he has and how much Europe has? And I mean, Europe has like at least 500. Russia has like at least 600. Ukraine has like zero, and and they want to crap the shit out of Russia. No, Russia's gonna crap the shit out of us. So it's like it's just messed up. But yeah, getting back to Bitcoin, maybe. Are you guys also at conferences then, where you have like panels or like stands, where you talk about Bitcoin or show people Bitcoin, or do you also operate at conferences then? Did I get that right? Or
yeah, so we are at conferences all the time. I was just down in Austin 2 weeks ago for the Bitcoin takeover. There was a bunch of side by side events along with South by Southwest is a cultural festival that takes place in Austin every single year, but Bitcoin wasn't really representative. But the Bitcoin
okay,
scene in Austin is really strong. They have a place there called Bitcoin Commons, which is the home of a bunch of companies like Unchained, TFTC, Marty Bent films his podcast there. Pleb Lab, the sort of business incubator for Bitcoin startups, is also there as well. So went down to Austin, went to Pleb Lab's startup day where they had the competition for the next great startup in the Bitcoin world. Saw that go down. Then the next day, Parker Lewis threw Bitcoin Takeover, a day long full of events of Bitcoin talks and networking and
mhm,
steak lunch and all that good stuff. So it was just in Austin. I wasn't able to make it this week, but this week was Mining Disrupt down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at the world's largest
okay,
mining conference. That's one thing that we like to do is also promote Bitcoin events around the world, right? So we had a partnership with them. We promoted it for the last few months, got them hundreds of thousands of impressions online to promote the event, and it was a huge success this week. Next event is Bitcoin Magazine's, of course, Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas. We are media partners, official media partners. We have press passes. We'll have access to everywhere in the conference, be able to interview people on the floor. And I mean, for one thing, for the first, I'd say, year and a half plus of running Bitcoin News, I was pretty much behind the scenes. I didn't really grow my Twitter account at all. I was focusing all my energy on growing Bitcoin News's socials. But over the last 6 months, I've been getting my face out there more with these videos, these TikTok videos, Instagram videos, posting them all over, and have made an effort because, I mean, having Bitcoin News as a brand is great, but people associate so much more with a face, right? And for pretty much any big Bitcoin brand, you can associate at least one main guy with the brand itself. So that's been my mission for the last couple of months, and yeah, I think so far so good. But yeah, now I do want to do more speakings at conferences and whatnot. At Adopting Bitcoin over in El Salvador last November, I did a panel on Bitcoin marketing and social media, which was a lot of fun to do. But yeah, I'm ready to get out there, such as do things like this.
Cool, dude. So, before I'm gonna end this episode, I always try to do like 30 minutes, like when I record an episode. Sometimes it goes over that. I mean, the last one was like an hour and a half, maybe, I think, if I remember correctly. But anyway, so before we're gonna end this episode, I wanted to ask you, so where can people find you, and what's the easiest way to find the Bitcoin news? Is there like a website, which I would assume there is like a website, otherwise it would be like hard to find you guys. But is there a website? Where can people find you personally? Are you on Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok? Where are you guys? Where can we find you guys?
Yeah, we're everywhere. Bitcoinnews.com is the website. You can find links to all of our socials there. But we're Bitcoin News com, one word, on most socials, whether that's X or YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. We are everywhere. So just go and find that, and I'm sure you'll find me, Rob Wallace, is being reposted by one of those things. So yeah, please come check us out. Thank you for taking the time to chat today. Really appreciate it.
No worries, my pleasure. So yeah, dear people, that was another episode of Nomad Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. And Rob, one more last question for you. Are you in Las Vegas together with the Bitcoin news?
Yeah. We'll be interviewing people on the floor. We'll be there.
Okay, cool. So we'll see you there. So Rob, have a nice day, and dear people, have a nice day, and Rob, see you in Las Vegas. Bye.
Nomad Podcast.